Welcome. Hello again. We're back for another episode. So today's question is this: what mess are you living at within your life?
In other words, are you lined up with your integrity? And today we just want to have a real honest conversation. I'm going to say a hard look at how we are living, because as Christian women, the world is watching how we live.
So are you living in alignment with the Bible, I'm going to say, with our blueprint for best living?
Well, and with what we say we believe, right? If we talk the talk, but we don't walk the talk, then yikes, that's a scary place to be, right? And like, it's no wonder that sometimes, this is kind of a harsh thing to say, but it's no wonder that sometimes we get called hypocrites as Christians, because we are. And we're fallen people, we're just regular people too who make mistakes. But we've got to be aware of those areas in our life where we are like saying this and we're living this.
Yeah.
Because that does not line up.
No. So our scripture verse talks about that double-mindedness, because that's what it really is. It's double-mindedness. So if you go to the scripture, let's read it. It's from Proverbs 11, and it says this: "The Lord detests dishonest scales, but accurate weights find favor with him. When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom," which is what we want.
Yeah.
But verse 3 says, "The integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity." Now, you might say, well, Ruth and Casey, what does that even mean? What does duplicity mean? And we had to look it up, because it's like, well, we know we can duplicate things, and that means,
multiply or more than
do
one.
it again, do
double.
the same thing again.
Yeah.
But it talks about, where we looked it up, it's this double-mindedness. It's this double living. You're living a double life.
Yeah. Yeah, when we looked up, like, what does it mean in Proverbs 11, verse 3, when it says, "The unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity," and it's like their double-mindedness, their double life. They're saying this and living this.
And that is not how we are called to live, not how we want to live as believers. We want to be full of integrity. We want to have those scales balanced.
But can we just talk for a minute about how incredibly easy it is to not be living in alignment with what we say we believe? So it can look like some pretty simple things that maybe are happening in your life, because if I'm honest, they've happened in my life, right?
They've happened in mine too. And it's hard to bring this to the forefront, because you're probably going to go, yeah, you're talking to me.
Or you're going to like all sorts of justification in your head for, well, why it's okay.
But I'm going to say this, I'll give you another verse before we even get into this hard stuff, because we're also talking to ourselves.
Absolutely.
So just know that we're not judging you. We're talking to you, ourselves, and trying to speak the truth of what scripture, the wisdom on how we actually want to live. We want to be living a life that's full of integrity, because that's what God is calling us to do. And another verse that it says, "Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Do unto others as you would have others do unto me." Like, we want to be doing the things that we would, being treated the way we would want to be treated.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say one of the things is, if you're going to work, it's like as simple as have integrity with your time at work. Like, if you're starting work at 9:00, do you clock in at 9:00?
Or 9:02?
And say, oh, I was there on time? Well, no, actually you weren't there on time. We used to own a business.
Well, we still do, but we used to own a bricks and mortar business with employees. Yeah.
We used to own a coffee shop, and we didn't like it when the employees opened up the store.
Oh, just at 6:05.
Yeah, no, that doesn't work for us.
No.
And it doesn't work if you're clocking out 5 minutes early. That just doesn't really work for us. So does it work for you?
Yeah.
Like, we have to really ask ourselves these things. Or maybe at work, like, are you taking pens home because you're short of pens at home? And they really are pens that belong to the office.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. Like, I know I've taken things home from work that didn't belong to me. And I'm not, I'm ashamed to admit that, but it's true. I have taken pens from the office, like, oh, sometimes it's, not even consciously, like I don't even know I'm doing it, but then I'm like, oh, where did that come from? Oh, that's work pen.
Yeah.
Right?
And then are you intentional about taking it back, right? Or is it just like, oh, well.
Yeah. Or here's another example. Like, have you ever, had something in your shopping bag from a store that wasn't paid for, or you didn't pay enough?
Mm-hmm.
And you come home and you go, oh, that doesn't really belong to me. I didn't pay for it.
Yeah, well, actually, an example of that I have years ago, a friend of mine, I remember her telling me, and my stomach just kind of turned when she told me this. She had her stroller with her little baby in the store, and she'd put a whole bunch of little onesies on the bottom, and paid for everything else, got out to her car, didn't realize that those were there, and she was like, oh, well, sweet deal for me. And I was like, no, not really sweet deal for you. Like, that's not how we're called to live. And like, the mistake happens, right?
Yeah.
Like, but then go back.
Yeah, because we can't live under those. I'm going to say it's a really big weight on your shoulder when you know that they don't belong to you.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, back to the example of work. I remember a time like years ago at a job that I had that I really disliked.
Yeah, that doesn't help.
No, that doesn't help. But it doesn't make it right.
No, it doesn't.
Like, talking about showing up late, I was supposed to be there at 8 o'clock, and I was like pushing it to get there for like 8:02 every morning because I did like the job, but that was not right. And like, what a terrible testimony that left on my behalf, right?
Right.
Like, that's terrible.
And so if you know it takes 20 minutes to get to work, don't leave 20 minutes from your house.
Yeah,
you know
right.
that, sometimes things happen. Maybe you're going to get all the red lights and you're going to get there at 5 after. Give yourself a little bit of breathing room. Give yourself some space. And don't you think people are going to be watching that and seeing that?
Yeah.
I know as a boss, I really appreciated when people were 5 minutes there before their time, because then they can go to the, get whatever they have to do, get a drink, go to the washroom, be working at the time that your shift starts.
Well, and can I just say, I think when we're talking about the business we used to own, the people who were constantly late were the Christian people who worked for us.
Oh boy.
The non-Christian ones were the ones who were early.
That's not a good way to show that we are believers.
No, it's terrible. And it reflects very poorly on our faith. And I think that's why, we called this video a hard conversation about healthy Christian living, because as Christian women, or as Christians in general, people are watching how we live. And like, if you're late one day and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm sorry, this happened, like, where it happens,
We're
right?
not talking about perfection here.
Exactly.
We're talking about the regular day-to-day walk the talk.
Yeah.
And being in alignment with what God's word says. And one of them is integrity.
Yeah.
We just read it.
Or like, another thing that I often think about, we were at church yesterday because it's Monday. At 9 o'clock when our service starts, it is like nobody in the sanctuary. By 10 after, the place can't even find a seat.
Wow.
Why can we not even show up on time to church? Honestly. Like,
yeah.
I get it. I used to this is something that I've really been working on in my life, is being on time. Because I have struggled with that for my whole life. But I am really consciously right now making an effort at being early for things, because oh my goodness, the stress you feel when you're running behind all the time, when you don't have to be. If you left 5 minutes earlier, the stress is gone.
Not only that, talk about time again. If you're meeting someone for coffee and they're 15 minutes late, like it is a little bit disturbing.
It's frustrating.
Yeah, it gets really frustrating. And maybe you have a friend and you go, oh, they're always late, so I can leave late. They're always late. They're just known for being late.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not a good testimony if you're a believer, because it's really like saying, well, your time isn't valuable, but mine is.
Mm-hmm.
Those 15 minutes, like, I'm going to run around and do all this first, and then, she won't mind. No, don't be like that. Don't live like that, because you're wasting their time because they're waiting for you.
Yeah.
Or if it's me, make sure I'm on time.
Mm-hmm. But like, integrity just filters through every area of our life, right? Like we've talked about being on time, we've talked about taking pens from the office, we've talked about like all of these different things, but anything that we say that we believe or value, the way that we live should line up with that.
Here's another one. What about hotels?
Oh, yeah.
You know, when you go and you pay, oh, well, I paid so much money for that room. I deserve to have all this extra, and I'm going to fill my purse and take stuff from the hotel.
Yeah, from the maid's cart when I walk by, when the maid isn't, like when the people doing the
trolley's
cleaning,
sitting
the
there.
trolleys are there, right? Like that stuff does not belong to you.
It doesn't. The stuff that you paid for in your room, there's little coffee pods or whatever there is, you've paid to have that and enjoy it. But don't grab extra because it isn't yours.
Yeah. If you need more and you call down and say, hey, could we have another couple coffee pods? Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But just think about it. If it was your business, would you want everyone else that has paid money for the room that you've given them and there's stuff in the room, then would you want your stuff being all taken out? I know I wouldn't.
No. And I think like when we talk about so much of this stuff, it's like everything else is the state of our heart.
That's right.
Like
It really
if you
is.
walk by the maid's cart and you're like, oh, I deserve that because I paid for that room and blah, blah,
And it
blah,
was
blah,
so
and it was so-
expensive.
yeah.
You didn't
Like-
have to stay there.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's
Yeah.
about a check-in with the state of our hearts.
It really is.
I think more than anything else. And that back to that verse in Proverbs, the Lord detests dishonest scales.
Wow.
So where in your life is there dishonesty? Here's another one. Calling in sick when you're not sick. Because maybe there's something exciting on TV you wanted to watch, or there's an exciting concert in another city that you think you're going to get away with, and you might get away with it. But you know what? It's not about what you can get away with. It's about accurate weights find favor with God.
That's right.
Right? That's what the rest of that verse says in
Yeah.
Proverbs.
And you know, you can say and justify all we can say and justify all we want. Like we say, oh, I need a mental health day. I need it. And you know what? Yes, sometimes I agree. You do need a mental health day. And we're not saying that you don't need a mental health day, but then make it a mental health day.
Yeah.
It's not, oh, I'm going on a holiday. Oh, I'm taking an extra day of my vacation. It's not, oh, you know, just for the sake of, I'm going to phone in sick.
Yeah.
That's just not the way God is calling us to live.
No.
At least we don't see that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think really the point of the conversation today is that each
a
one
hard
of
one,
us
too.
needs, exactly, each one of us needs to take a really honest look at how we live and ask ourselves, like, people are watching. So what would they say about us? Would they say that we are living, like walking the talk? Or would they say that all we do is talk the talk and we're hypocrites? And so like,
Yeah. It's a really
you got to ask yourself that, right? Maybe it's about your money. Maybe it's about your weight. Maybe it's about like integrity filters through everything. And so there, and I think the thing is like, there's going to be an area that we could probably all work on, right? Like
Yeah.
we're imperfect people. And so we have to apply grace, but we also have to like, how does that saying go? You cannot change what you are unwilling to confront.
Yeah.
And so we've got to do the work to take a look at how we're living.
And I mean, the Bible is so clear. Do unto others as you would have them do to you. Like, that's a pretty easy, basic thing to just go, oh, I wouldn't want anyone doing that to me.
Yeah.
Oh, I wouldn't want that from my business. Oh, I wouldn't want people taking my time. I don't want, let's think about that because it can change our life. And we want the blessing of God on us. So let's not be living that duplicity, like the
Yeah.
verse said, that double-minded, double
life.
double life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I just had a very bad experience last week at a coffee shop here where we live. And I'm going to say I was not kind.
This on the web.
Well,
Got Siri chiming in here. I got really upset and I was not kind. And I'm not proud of that. And I had to go back and apologize because it
was weighing on your shoulders.
yeah. And I mean, what happened wasn't right, but my response wasn't right either. And so I think like no matter where we're at, we're gonna mess it up sometimes. But the biggest part is like taking responsibility, taking ownership for what's going on and applying some grace and maybe asking for forgiveness for from whoever it is that maybe it's from ourselves, maybe it's we need to ask God for forgiveness. Like we often talk about this little acronym that we've come up with. We've got to accept where we're at. We've got to forgive, whether it's forgive ourselves, forgive someone else, ask for forgiveness. Then we've got to surrender the journey moving forward, and then we've got to move forward. And I think like that applies to so many different things in our life. We have to talk about it with weight loss too, but it's true here too. When we talk about integrity, when we talk about messing it all up, we've got to accept and acknowledge where we're at and what's going on.
I love that. And so that's an example of something that just happened to Casey, and it's very fresh in her memory. So we're not speaking to you, we're speaking to us as believers, as, you know, we want to walk the talk so that, because people are watching us. We need to clean up the messes in our life. And we have a lot of messes because we're not perfect. And God is not, he's not expecting perfection.
No, thank goodness.
But he is expecting the heart to change.
Yeah.
And that's what he's looking at, I believe. And so we want to be walking the talk. It just reminds me of something I listened to on a sermon on YouTube. And she was talking about the story about where the sick person is trying to get into the healing waters. And he's been there for so many years trying to get in, trying to get in. And then Jesus comes to him one day. I don't know how many years later I don't know how many years he had been there, but it was like a lot. And Jesus says to him, do you want to be healed? Like, he actually asked the question to this man, do you want to be healed? So we have to ask ourselves that, do we want to live this life of integrity? And as a believer, I hope our answer is yes.
But sometimes it's no, because we want to keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah,
right?
So that's why we have to really have the hard conversations with ourselves. Do we want to live like this, or do we want to change? But then Jesus says to him, after asking the question, get up, he says. He actually had to do the work. He had to get up. Jesus didn't lift him up. Jesus said, get up. And then he said, pick up your mat. And I love that, because in the sermon, and I had never heard it this way before, but it was like, clean up your mess too. Pick up your mat and follow me. Clean up your mess. Don't leave the dirty mat laying around.
Yeah.
Pick up your mat and follow me. We have to pick up and clean up our messes and get moving forward. Love that.
Yeah, I know. That's such an interesting take on that story, but it's so true. I'm sure he didn't want that mat
No.
that he'd laid on for years and years and years.
To burn it right now.
Probably, but good. Pick it up, clean it up, and get rid of it, right? But don't leave it for somebody else to deal with.
That's right.
So yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah.
If you're here watching, let us know in the comments what you think about this. This is a hard conversation. What does integrity mean to you? What area of your life do you need to like clean up your mess?
Or maybe it's an area that you're thinking of, and maybe we need to clean up our mess there too.
Yeah, exactly. But be gentle on YouTube, because it's easy to type something on a screen, right?
That's right.
In fact, that reminds me of something else, a little unrelated, but I'm going to say it. It's really easy. I listened to a sermon one, this is years ago, but I've thought about it so much. It was one of those really impactful ones for me. That was like, it's easy to listen to a sermon and think about everybody else and all of the messes that they're in and how it applies to everybody else except for you.
So true.
Right? And I catch myself doing that all the time. Like at church, when I listen to something online, even when we come up with our own stuff here, it is so easy to look at somebody else and point the finger and go like, oh, this so-and-so needs to listen to this. And instead, we need to be looking inside here.
Deep
right?
within.
And so that sermon has convicted me over and over and over and over and over and over again. Like that's probably 20 years ago. No, maybe not that old. I'm not that old. It's probably 10 years ago that I heard that sermon.
That old.
Yeah, well, I'm that old too, but I don't think it was actually 20 years ago. Anyways, for like the last decade, so many times I catch myself and I'm like, oh, I don't even remember who preached the sermon, to be honest. Yeah. But it was one of those where it was like, oh boy, yep. I guess I gotta look at me, not be pointing the finger and thinking about who else needs to listen to this.
Yeah, which is so easy to do. We just, our minds just go to, oh, that person.
Yeah.
No, let's look inside of us.
Yeah.
You know? So it is a hard conversation, and we're dealing with this just like you are. And so, yeah, type in the comments what it is, or maybe what mess you need to clean up. What mess there's so many messes that we could talk about.
Exactly.
But let's just walk the talk.
Yeah. So I think today we should end by saying, remember that you are a beautiful woman chosen for greatness.
And we believe in you.
See you Thursday.